Well, hey, everybody. My name is Scott, and this is my friend Nathan. And as many of you know, we read some good books, at least books we think that are good. And then we have a brief conversation about them. And we relate them to recovery because we both work with Celebrate Recovery here at Christ Community Church in Westchester, PA, to which you're always invited to any of our meetings. We meet on Monday nights at 7 o'clock. Love to have you. Love for you to share this video as well. Our goal here is to help anyone who is in recovery, which is arguably everyone since Adam and Eve. But with that said, we are looking right now at chapter 43 of Peter Bregman's book called Leading with Emotional Courage. Chapter 43, Risk is the Key to Leadership, Unlocking Your Success Equation. Interesting how this chapter started out, Nathan. He started out by talking about the story of Jim, who and his fencing adventures. Do you remember this?
Yep.
And
yep.
If I followed it right, Jim was not a fencer. He was invited to, somebody dropped out of a high-level fencing championship, and Jim was the kind of person that, though he had zero fencing experience, he jumped into that tournament, and not only did he not win a match, he didn't win a point.
That's right.
But I think Bregman's point was, it didn't matter that he didn't win a point. It was really just evidence of the kind of person that Jim was. He was a risk taker of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what he's encouraging us to be, is leaders are risk takers. Now, he doesn't encourage us to be reckless risk takers, but he does encourage us to ask, are we taking risks? Because we'll only move forward either in leadership or in recovery if we're taking some calculated, bold, courageous risks.
Yeah. I will read off his equation because, it's good for Jim. He said, this is what his pattern is. And the first one, you know what it is? It's integrity. The first one's integrity. Plus, now this one wouldn't necessarily speak to a lot of people, but the next one is insecurity. And that goes along with the risk. But the next one's ambition, saying yes, plus asking for help, plus problem solving, plus optimism, plus relationships, plus capability. And of course, he says, Jim doesn't ask, will I succeed? He says, is it worth the risk? And I think even in recovery, that's what we should look at, because we can often be afraid of either what success, the process to get there is like, or we can fear that we won't truly get success. But if you just say, is it worth the risk? I do feel like in fact, the majority, unless, well, you probably wouldn't be coming to Celebrate Recovery if you don't want to recover, but you will say yes to, is it worth the risk? So.
Yeah. I often say to new people who come to Celebrate Recovery, I realize it took a lot of courage, or it probably took a lot of courage for you to walk through those doors.
Mm-hmm.
Even though when they get on the other side, I'm almost 100% certain they will meet friendly people who will welcome them, and they will likely have a good, healthy experience.
Yeah.
But it takes a lot of risk and courage to walk through those doors, as it does to say, yeah, I'm struggling in this area, I need help.
Right. I mean, he says down below, there's a balance between the fear of the failure, which means that you want to work hard, to overcome that sense of I could fail at this, but not so much fear that you don't show up in the first place. So
Yes. So then that theme of risk runs through the next chapter as well,
yeah,
where in chapter 44, he encourages us to build our risk muscle. And
yep,
he talks about small personal risks that actually will change behavior.
right. I mean,
And
he goes ahead and acknowledges a lot of things. We're scared of looking bad, of failing, of being humiliated. We're hiding. We don't want to be vulnerable. All of these things, and in terms of leadership, he's saying that it takes a leader to, or it shows who the leader is when they're willing to show up. So even if you're not the leader in the room, showing up in that way is already revealing the kind of person you are.
yes, and he gives the example of being in a extended worship service and wanting to take his shoes and socks off as an act of worship, and yet thinking he might be judged for doing so. And then the next thing he sees somebody else doing it, and so he decides to do it.
No,
And then
actually,
yeah,
he saw the person on the stage didn't have shoes on, so he did it. And the person who he thought would judge him actually started taking his shoes off after he saw Peter do it.
that's right.
So, it's an amazing thing to always let the fears be in front of us, or to take the risk. And it turns out that the people we thought, we're going to judge actually ends up getting in line behind us,
That's right.
So,
Okay, so ends that by saying, practice taking risks by making some decisions you've been procrastinating about.
yeah,
And I like that. And that
yeah,
leads us in then to chapter 45, make a decision, act boldly to get moving. And I really like this because
yeah.
once again, he got very practical.
Hmm.
He sets the context in the beginning of this chapter by saying we spend a lot of energy making decisions
Yeah,
about equally attractive options in many different areas. And, choosing from a menu is a good example. It's certainly it's on the lighter side of decisions, but we do make all kinds of decisions
that's
all
right.
day.
And each one can kind of drain our decision making capacity. Like it's often in the mornings where we can get the most work done, or it's often in the morning where we want to set a good pace for the day, or where we want to work out, or we want to, or devotion. And even the smallest choices can take some of that decision making ability uh, down. Whether we're shopping in a big place, whether it's for toothpaste or groceries, or whether you're shopping for clothes. I mean, each of those kind of takes a certain energy. And that's why we find ourselves, in my opinion, most decisions are made, or most unhealthy decisions are made at the end of the day.
Mm.
And others can disagree with me, but it does seem to be the most opportune time to make an unhealthy decision, if I put it that way.
Yep. So his suggestion is to use habits to reduce decision fatigue, which you're talking about.
Yep.
He gives the example of, I'm going to decide in advance that I'm always going to have salads for lunch. Now, again, that's his example.
Yeah.
But that way, when you go out to eat, you immediately limit your decision fatigue.
That's right. If you've already made and committed yourself to a certain standard of living, setting the framework is extremely important.
So then he gives another very practical tool, and that is using if-then thinking. And I thought this was really, I found this very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
He has an if-then decision that he's made in advance. And the decision is, I guess it's really a principle that results in a decision. If someone interrupts him twice in a conversation, he will point it out.
Yeah. Yeah. I honestly, it takes that pause though. At some point he will have to think, oh, I've reached the then, you
Yes,
know, and sometimes it takes a breath to just have that pause in that space, but that's why preparation is so key. When before you're even going into the restaurant, set the decision before you start heading home. Already be thinking about what it's like to play a game with your kids, or have a good walk with your wife or your partner. So it's those small things beforehand that can really set us on a better path.
the third one, he does on the second one under the if then, he
Yeah.
does ask us to consider what he uses a cool word here, so I wanted to use it too. He says, what decisions do you perseverate over?
Yeah.
Meaning, I love that word. What decisions do we keep going round and round and we just don't make them? And in light of that, he introduces a very practical way to make a decision, which caught me off guard, but I'm like, So it's use a timer.
Yep. And especially good for people who are thinking, I'm just thinking strengths. My common mistake is overthinking. Even though I actually have activator, my activator shows up after I've thought about things, and it usually looks like I'm going very quickly after I've thought. But the thing that holds me up is overthinking, and sometimes you won't ever feel like, that emotionally you don't feel like you have enough information or you have enough courage. Sometimes you just have to go with what you have and then course correct along the way. And I have found that does work. You make a decision and you're evaluating in the beginning. So that way, if oh, it wasn't quite correct, maybe it was just wrong, then I can either back out and change direction, or I just shift it a little bit, or I'm on the right course. But what doesn't help is you've not made the decision. You can't fix what hasn't been decided upon. And in my opinion, indecision can be honestly a deal breaker when it comes to hurt, habit, and hang up, because being indecisive means that you'll fall back on what you've learned in the past. And let's face it, that's where the hurts, habits, and hangups will gladly step in and fill that gap.
Absolutely. That's right. So we might say, if I have a decision about going to a meeting, I'm going to decide in the morning
Yeah.
that I'm going to go to the meeting at night. It's a done deal. I'm not going to wait until to see how I feel. I'm just going to decide.
Right. That way, in the Monday morning rolls around and you're thinking, you know what? Every time I go, I leave that place feeling good. Rather than at 5 o'clock, you're thinking, man, I'm just so tired today. I wonder if I should go. Immediately, you've already entered a losing battle. At that point, let's face it, and that's not just CR. That's any decision that's in front of you. You've entered at a disadvantage.
That's right.
And I don't want to be at a disadvantage. I don't think other people want to be at a disadvantage. Do you?
That's right. Right. So the point here is, if you have two equal options, just make a decision. Obviously, he doesn't discount seeking wise counsel or thinking about it, processing it. But if you've done all that, make a decision, act boldly, move forward. Remembering too that he says, which I agree, failure is at least as beneficial as success.
Yeah, some people don't even these days call it failure. Some people actually just call it more like falling forward. And as long as you are are cognizant and committed to learning from it, then it won't be failure. And failure will be you're stopping altogether and you
Hmm.
haven't learned from it and you've just given up,
Yeah.
you know. So
So
make
make a decision. Make a decision to join us for the next
right.
time. We're going to pick it up with chapter 46. It's your job to tell the bold truth. So that should be a good one.
All right.
See you next time.